Maya Chen had always believed that words held more power than fists. She clutched her worn leather diary against her chest as she navigated the crowded hallways of Riverside High, her dark eyes scanning the sea of faces that barely acknowledged her existence. The diary contained 3 years of her most private thoughts, dreams about becoming a writer, sketches of characters from stories she hoped to tell, and pages upon pages of observations about the people around her. What none of her classmates knew was that beneath Maya's oversized sweater and quiet demeanor lay muscles trained through 8 years of rigorous martial arts discipline, a secret she guarded as carefully as the words in her diary. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning started like any other Tuesday in October. Maya arrived early to school, settling into her usual spot in the far corner of the library where she could write undisturbed before classes began. She opened her diary to a fresh page, her pen dancing across the paper as she described the autumn leaves falling outside the window like golden confetti. The familiar scratch of pen on paper soothed her nerves, a ritual that had carried her through the loneliness of being the new girl who had transferred to Riverside High just 2 months earlier when her family moved from Seattle. Maya had learned early in her school experience that visibility often meant vulnerability. At her previous school, she had made the mistake of speaking up in class too often, of letting her intelligence show through eager participation and thoughtful questions. The attention had drawn the wrong kind of notice from students who saw academic enthusiasm as a target for mockery. Since then, she had perfected the art of invisibility, sliding through her days like a ghost, speaking only when called upon and keeping her brilliant mind hidden behind a facade of shy silence. The bell for first period shattered the peaceful quiet of the library, and Maya carefully closed her diary, sliding it into the front pocket of her backpack where it would stay safe throughout the day. She gathered her books and joined the stream of students flowing toward their classes, her steps light and purposeful despite the weight of exhaustion that seemed to follow her everywhere. Sleep had been elusive lately, haunted by dreams of her old dojo in Seattle, where she had spent countless hours perfecting her technique under the watchful eye of Master Kim. Her family's move to Portland had been sudden, necessitated by her father's job transfer, and Maya had been forced to leave behind the dojo that had been her second home since she was 7 years old. Master Kim had been more than an instructor. He had been a mentor who taught her that true strength came not from the ability to inflict harm, but from the discipline to avoid conflict whenever possible. The last lesson he had given her before she left Seattle echoed in her mind daily. A warrior's greatest victory is the battle never fought. At Riverside High, Maya had not yet found a new dojo, partly because her parents were still settling into their new jobs, and partly because she was not sure she was ready to start over with a new instructor. The martial arts had always been her private sanctuary, a place where she could channel her intensity and focus into something productive. Without that outlet, she felt like a pressure cooker with no release valve, all that energy and training contained within her small frame with nowhere to go. Her first class of the day was AP Literature with Mrs. Rodriguez, one of the few teachers who seemed to notice Maya's potential despite her reluctance to participate. Maya slipped into her seat in the middle row, positioning herself where she could observe without drawing attention. The classroom filled with the usual mix of students. The overachievers who sat in the front row with color-coded notebooks, the athletes who clustered together comparing stories from weekend games, and the social elite, who treated every class like an extension of their personal social hour. Among the social elite was Jessica Parker, a tall blonde with perfect teeth and an even more perfect ability to make others feel small with just a glance. Jessica had been homecoming queen the previous year and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place at the top of the high school hierarchy. She was flanked by her constant companions, Amber Walsh, whose family owned half the restaurants in town, and Chloe Martinez, whose sharp tongue could cut down anyone who dared to challenge their group supremacy. Maya had managed to avoid any direct conflict with Jessica's circle for the 2 months she had been at Riverside High, but she had witnessed their casual cruelty toward other students. They had a particular talent for identifying insecurities and exploiting them with surgical precision, all while maintaining plausible deniability about their intentions. A comment about someone's clothes, a laugh at just the right moment, a social media post that seemed innocent but carried a hidden barb. They were masters of psychological warfare, disguised as typical teenage behavior. Mrs. Rodriguez called the class to attention and began discussing their current reading assignment, a novel about resilience in the face of adversity. Maya found herself drawn into the discussion despite her usual reluctance to speak, the themes resonating with her own experience of starting over in a new place. When Mrs. Rodriguez asked for thoughts on how the protagonist dealt with isolation, Maya surprised herself by raising her hand. "I think she finds strength in writing," Maya said, her voice quiet but clear. "It becomes a way for her to process her experiences and maintain her sense of self when everything else is changing." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled warmly, clearly pleased to hear from Maya. "Excellent observation, Maya. The act of writing can indeed be a form of resistance and self-preservation. Can you elaborate on what you mean by maintaining her sense of self?" Maya felt the familiar flutter of nerves that came with being the center of attention, but she pushed through it. When you write down your thoughts and feelings, they become real in a way that internal thoughts sometimes don't. It's like creating evidence that you exist, that your experiences matter, even when the world around you seems to suggest otherwise. A few students turned to look at Maya with surprise, unused to hearing her speak so thoughtfully. Jessica Parker's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she was filing away this information for future use. Maya immediately regretted drawing attention to herself, but Mrs. Rodriguez was already moving the discussion forward, and the moment passed without further incident. The rest of the period proceeded normally, with Maya returning to her usual role as silent observer. When the bell rang, she quickly gathered her materials and headed for the door, hoping to blend back into anonymity. As she walked down the hallway toward her next class, she overheard Jessica talking to Amber behind her. "Did you hear the new girl trying to sound all deep and philosophical?" Jessica said, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure Maya would hear. "I bet she thinks she's so much smarter than everyone else." Maya's cheeks burned, but she kept walking, her training kicking in as she focused on maintaining steady breathing and relaxed shoulders. Master Kim had taught her that emotional reactions were often what bullies were seeking, and the best defense was to deny them the satisfaction of a visible response. She ducked into the nearest bathroom and took a moment to center herself, pressing her palms against the cool tile wall and counting her breaths until the surge of anger subsided. The rest of the morning passed without incident, though Maya noticed Jessica's group paying more attention to her than usual. During lunch, she retreated to her usual spot in the art wing, where she could eat in peace while working on her writing. She pulled out her diary and began describing the morning's events, using the familiar practice of putting pen to paper to process her emotions and thoughts. Writing had always been Maya's way of making sense of the world around her. In her diary, she could be completely honest about her feelings, her fears, and her observations, without fear of judgment or ridicule. She wrote about missing her old school and her friends in Seattle, about the loneliness of starting over, and about the strange sensation of carrying a secret skill that no one around her knew she possessed. The diary was her confidant, her therapist, and her creative outlet all rolled into one worn leather volume. As she wrote, Maya reflected on the irony of her situation. She had spent years training her body to be a weapon, learning techniques that could disable an opponent in seconds, yet she chose to wield words instead of force. Her martial arts training had taught her that true strength lay in restraint, in knowing that she could defend herself if necessary but choosing not to unless absolutely required. The discipline required for that level of self-control was perhaps greater than any physical technique she had mastered. Her afternoon classes passed in a blur of equations and historical dates, with Maya maintaining her usual low profile. It was not until she was walking to her locker at the end of the day that trouble found her. She was focused on organizing her books when she heard Jessica's voice behind her, closer than she expected. "Hey, writing girl," Jessica called out, her tone deceptively friendly. "I saw you scribbling away during lunch." "What's so important that you have to write it down?" Maya turned slowly, her pulse quickening as she found herself face to face with Jessica and her two companions. The hallway was emptying out as students headed home, leaving fewer witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. Maya clutched her backpack closer, hyper-aware of her diary nestled in the front pocket. "Just homework," Maya replied carefully, her voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. Amber laughed, a sound devoid of genuine humor. "Homework? During lunch? Come on, we saw you with that little book." It looked way too personal to be homework. Maya's martial arts training had taught her to read body language and assess threats, and every instinct she had was telling her that this situation was escalating beyond casual teasing. Jessica's posture was aggressive. Her weight shifted forward as if she was preparing to move. Chloe had positioned herself slightly to Maya's left, cutting off one potential escape route. Amber stood directly behind Jessica, forming a loose semicircle that trapped Maya against her locker. "It's nothing important," Maya said, taking a small step backward until her shoulders touched the metal locker door. "Just personal notes." Jessica's eyes lit up with predatory interest. "Personal notes? Like a diary?" The word hung in the air like a challenge, and Maya felt her stomach drop. She had always been careful to keep her diary private, never taking it out when others might see, but apparently her discretion had not been enough. Jessica had obviously been watching her more closely than Maya had realized. "Everyone has a right to privacy," Maya said, her voice gaining strength as she drew on the confidence her training had instilled in her. "Whatever I write is my business." Chloe snorted. "Privacy? In high school? That's cute. Nothing stays private here, especially not when you're trying so hard to be mysterious and special." Maya felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded any potential confrontation, her body automatically shifting into a more balanced stance as her muscles prepared for action. Years of training had conditioned her to recognize the signs of impending conflict, and everything about this situation was setting off warning signals. Yet she remained committed to Master Kim's teachings about avoiding unnecessary fights. "I'm not trying to be anything," Maya said quietly. "I just want to be left alone." Jessica stepped closer, invading Maya's personal space in a way that was clearly intended to intimidate. "That's the problem with people like you. You think you're too good to interact with the rest of us. You sit by yourself, you don't talk to anyone, and you act like you're above it all." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya could smell Jessica's perfume, could see the calculation in her eyes as she searched for the best way to provoke a reaction. This was not random bullying. This was targeted harassment designed to establish dominance and put Maya in her place. Maya had seen it before at her previous school, the way certain students seemed to need to tear others down in order to feel powerful themselves. "I'm not above anything," Maya replied, her voice remaining calm despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. "I'm just new here, and I'm still figuring things out." Amber moved closer, joining Jessica in Maya's personal space. "Well, maybe we can help you figure things out, starting with what's in that diary of yours." The direct threat to her diary sent a spike of genuine fear through Maya's chest. The diary contained her most private thoughts, her deepest insecurities, and her honest opinions about many of the people around her, including some less than flattering observations about Jessica and her friends. If they got their hands on it and decided to share its contents, Maya's carefully maintained invisibility would be shattered in the most humiliating way possible. "There's nothing in there that would interest you," Maya said, her hand instinctively moving to protect the front pocket of her backpack where the diary rested. Jessica noticed the protective gesture and smiled like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Oh, but I think there is. I think there's probably some very interesting things in there. Thoughts about us, maybe? Little judgments and observations from the girl who thinks she's too good to talk to anyone?" Maya's training kicked in as she assessed her options. The hallway was nearly empty now, with only a few stragglers at their lockers far enough away that they were unlikely to intervene. The three girls blocking her path were clearly committed to this confrontation, and Maya could see no way to de-escalate the situation through words alone. Her hand tightened on the strap of her backpack as she prepared to defend her most precious possession. "Hand over the bag," Jessica said, her friendly facade finally dropping to reveal the cold determination underneath. "We just want to take a little peek at what you've been writing about us." Maya's mind raced through her options. She could try to push past them and run, but they would likely grab her backpack in the process. She could call for help, but the few remaining students in the hallway seemed determined to mind their own business. She could comply and hope they would be satisfied with just reading a few pages, but she knew instinctively that Jessica was not the type to show mercy once she sensed weakness. "No," Maya said simply, the word carrying more conviction than she had shown in any of their previous exchanges. Jessica's eyebrows rose in surprise, clearly not expecting such direct defiance. "Excuse me?" I said no. Maya's voice was steady now, drawing on the inner strength that years of martial arts training had cultivated. "You have no right to my personal belongings, and I'm not going to give them to you." The three girls exchanged glances, and Maya could see them recalibrating their approach. They had expected easy capitulation from the quiet girl, who had spent 2 months avoiding confrontation. Instead, they found themselves facing unexpected resistance, and Maya could see the calculation in their eyes as they decided how far they were willing to push this conflict. Chloe was the first to escalate. "Maybe you didn't understand the question," she said, reaching toward Maya's backpack. "It wasn't really a request." Maya's reflexes took over as Chloe's hand approached her bag. Without conscious thought, she stepped to the side and deflected Chloe's reach with a subtle movement that left the other girl grabbing at empty air. The motion was so smooth and natural that it almost looked accidental, but Maya felt the familiar satisfaction of perfectly executed technique. "Don't touch my things," Maya said, her voice carrying a new edge that made all three girls pause. Jessica's eyes narrowed as she realized that Maya was not going to be as easy to intimidate as they had expected. "You know what? I think you need to learn some respect. Around here, we don't tolerate stuck-up newcomers who think they're better than everyone else." Maya could see the situation spiraling toward violence, and every instinct she possessed was screaming at her to end this before it went too far. Yet she also knew that backing down now would only postpone the inevitable confrontation while making her appear weak to potential future aggressors. Sometimes, Master Kim had taught her, the only way to prevent a larger conflict was to demonstrate strength early and decisively. "I'm not looking for trouble," Maya said, shifting her weight slightly to a more balanced stance. "But I'm not going to let you take my property either." Jessica lunged forward suddenly, her hands reaching for Maya's backpack with aggressive intent, but Maya was ready. 8 years of training had taught her to read the subtle signs that preceded an attack. The slight shift in weight, the tension in the shoulders, the focusing of the eyes on the target. She saw Jessica's move coming before Jessica herself was fully committed to it. Maya stepped backward and to the side in one fluid motion, letting Jessica's momentum carry her forward while simultaneously protecting her backpack. Jessica stumbled slightly as her hands closed on nothing, her face flushing with embarrassment and anger at being outmaneuvered so easily. "You little," Jessica started, but Amber was already moving to flank Maya from the other side. Maya found herself in the position she had hoped to avoid, surrounded by multiple opponents with aggressive intent. Her training had prepared her for exactly this scenario, but she had never wanted to use those skills in a real conflict. The gap between practice and reality felt enormous, as adrenaline flooded her system and time seemed to slow to a crawl. Amber reached for the backpack strap across Maya's shoulder, her grip firm and determined. Maya could have easily broken the hold with any number of techniques, but she hesitated, still hoping to resolve the situation without violence. That moment of hesitation was all Jessica needed to join the grab for the backpack, her hands seeking the front pocket where Maya's diary lay hidden. "Just give it up already," Jessica snarled, her fingers finding the zipper of the front pocket. "What's the big deal about some stupid diary anyway?" Maya felt the zipper begin to slide open, and something inside her snapped. This was not just about intimidation or social dominance anymore. This was about her most private thoughts, her dreams, her fears, everything that made her who she was. The diary represented her inner self in physical form, and watching Jessica's hands violate that sacred space triggered a protective instinct that overwhelmed her commitment to pacifism. "Let go," Maya said, her voice carrying a warning that made all three girls pause for a moment. But Jessica was too committed to back down now, especially with her friends watching. She yanked hard on the backpack, trying to pull it away from Maya entirely. "Make me," she challenged, her voice loud enough to attract the attention of the few remaining students in the hallway. Maya felt the backpack being pulled away from her body, felt Jessica's hands fishing around in the front pocket for her diary. Time seemed to compress as she weighed her options. Let them take and possibly humiliate her by sharing her most private thoughts, or use her training to defend herself and risk revealing the secret she had kept hidden for 8 years. The decision was made for her when she felt Jessica's fingers close around the leather cover of her diary. Maya watched in slow motion as Jessica pulled the worn volume from the backpack, a triumphant grin spreading across her face as she held Maya's most precious possession aloft like a trophy. "Well, well," Jessica said, flipping through the pages with careless hands. "Let's see what little Maya has been writing about all of us." Maya's vision narrowed to a tunnel focused entirely on her diary in Jessica's hands. She could see pages of her careful handwriting being ruffled by Jessica's thumbs, could see the intimate words she had written being exposed to hostile eyes. Something primal and protective rose up inside her, overriding years of discipline and restraint. "Give it back," Maya said, her voice dropping to a tone that carried undertones of steel. Jessica laughed, continuing to flip through the pages. "Oh, this is good. Listen to this, guys. Jessica Parker acts like she owns the school, but I think she's probably just insecure about something. Well, at least you got one thing right about being insecure." Maya felt her control slipping away like sand through her fingers. Every word Jessica read aloud was a violation. Every laugh from her companions was fuel on a fire that had been building for 2 months of isolation and careful restraint. The diary represented everything vulnerable and honest about her, and watching it being turned into entertainment for her tormentors was more than she could bear. "I'm warning you," Maya said, taking a step toward Jessica with a fluidity that spoke of trained muscle memory. But Jessica was enjoying herself too much to pay attention to warnings. She found another passage and began reading aloud. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone at this school has ever had an original thought, or if they're all just copying what they think they're supposed to be." Amber and Chloe laughed appreciatively, clearly enjoying the public humiliation of someone they saw as an uppity outsider. Maya felt each laugh like a physical blow, her carefully constructed walls of self-control beginning to crumble under the assault on her privacy and dignity. "Oh, here's a good one," Jessica continued, her voice growing louder as she sensed an audience gathering. "I miss the dojo. I miss the feeling of being strong and capable. Here, I feel like I'm hiding the most important part of myself." The words hung in the air, and Maya felt a chill of exposure that went beyond the simple violation of her privacy. Jessica had just read aloud a passage that hinted at the secret Maya had worked so hard to keep hidden. The other girls did not seem to fully grasp the significance of what they had heard, but Maya knew it was only a matter of time before they started asking questions about what dojo meant, and what kind of strength she was referring to. "Dojo?" Chloe asked, her voice curious. "What's a dojo?" Maya's heart pounded as she realized her secret was about to be exposed in the worst possible way. The diary contained references to her martial arts training throughout its pages, and if Jessica continued reading, she would inevitably come across more explicit mentions of her skills and achievements. The thought of her private passion being turned into a source of mockery was almost as unbearable as the violation of her personal thoughts. "It's like a martial arts place," Amber said, her tone dismissive. "My little brother takes karate classes at one." Jessica's eyes lit up with new interest as she flipped through more pages, clearly searching for additional references to Maya's hidden life. "Well, well, little Maya has been keeping secrets. Let's see what else she's been hiding." Maya watched in horror as Jessica found a page where she had written extensively about missing her training partner and the meditative aspects of practicing forms. The words that had been meant as private reflection were about to become public knowledge, stripped of context and turned into ammunition for further humiliation. "Listen to this," Jessica said, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "Today I practiced my forms in my bedroom, but it's not the same without proper space and supervision. I worry that my technique is getting sloppy without regular correction." She looked up from the diary with a smirk. "So you think you know martial arts? That's precious." Maya felt something inside her chest break. The combination of having her private thoughts violated and her passion mocked was more than her carefully maintained composure could withstand. Years of training had taught her to channel her emotions constructively, but this assault on everything she held dear was pushing her beyond the limits of her self-control. "Please," Maya said, her voice carrying a note of desperation that made Jessica smile wider. "Just give it back." But Jessica was clearly enjoying the power she held over Maya too much to stop now. She continued flipping through pages, looking for more material to use against her victim. "Oh, here's something interesting. I wonder what would happen if people knew what I was really capable of. Would they treat me differently, or would they just be afraid?" The question hung in the air, and Maya realized with growing dread that Jessica was about to get an answer to that very query. Her diary contained detailed accounts of tournaments she had won, techniques she had mastered, and opponents she had defeated. If Jessica found those pages and read them aloud, Maya's secret would be completely exposed. "You know what?" Jessica said, her voice taking on a cruel edge. "I think everyone should hear about little Maya's delusions of being some kind of warrior." Maya watched in slow motion as Jessica raised the diary above her head, clearly intending to continue her public reading to the small crowd of students who had gathered to watch the confrontation. The sight of her most precious possession being held hostage and used as entertainment was more than Maya could bear. Time seemed to stop as Maya made a decision that would change everything. 8 years of training had prepared her body to move without conscious thought, to react with speed and precision when threatened. For 2 months, she had kept that part of herself carefully hidden, choosing words over action and restraint over force. But watching her diary being violated and her private thoughts being turned into public mockery pushed her beyond the breaking point. Maya's body moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent thousands of hours perfecting every motion. In one seamless movement, she stepped forward, reached up, and plucked the diary from Jessica's raised hand with a speed that made the other girl's reflexes seem sluggish by comparison. The motion was so quick and effortless that for a moment, no one fully processed what had happened. Jessica stared at her empty hands in confusion, then looked at Maya, who now held her diary protectively against her chest. The shocked expression on Jessica's face was almost comical, as if she could not quite believe that someone had just outmaneuvered her so completely. "How did you—" Jessica started, but Maya was already stepping backward, creating distance between herself and her attackers. Maya felt a strange sense of calm settling over her as she clutched her diary. The decision had been made, and there was no going back now. Her secret was about to be revealed, but at least it would be on her terms rather than through the violation of her private thoughts. "I asked you nicely to leave me alone," Maya said, her voice carrying a new quality that made the gathered students pay attention. "I tried to walk away. I gave you every chance to end this peacefully." Jessica's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Being outmaneuvered so easily in front of her friends and a growing audience was clearly not part of her plan. She stepped toward Maya aggressively, her hands clenched into fists. "You think you're clever?" Jessica snarled. "Give me back that diary right now, or I'll take it from you the hard way." Maya looked at Jessica's threatening posture and felt something shift inside her. The quiet, invisible girl who had spent 2 months avoiding confrontation was gone, replaced by someone who had finally been pushed too far. Her years of training had taught her that sometimes the only way to end a conflict was to demonstrate strength so overwhelming that further aggression became unthinkable. "The hard way?" Maya asked, her voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Jessica's eyes narrowed as she processed Maya's question, the challenge in those simple words cutting through her anger like a blade. The hallway had grown quieter, with more students stopping to watch what was clearly escalating beyond typical teenage drama. Word was spreading quickly through the remaining clusters of students that something significant was happening near the lockers, and the audience was growing by the minute. "You think you're intimidating me?" Jessica laughed, but there was a forced quality to the sound that suggested she was not as confident as she wanted to appear. "You're just some weird new girl who thinks she's special because she writes in a diary like a little kid." Maya adjusted her grip on the diary, holding it against her chest like a shield, while simultaneously ensuring her feet were positioned in a stable stance. The motion was so subtle that most observers would not notice it, but Maya felt the familiar comfort of proper balance settling into her bones. Her training had become so ingrained that defensive positioning was now automatic, triggered by the presence of threat rather than conscious decision. "I don't think I'm special," Maya replied, her voice carrying a calmness that seemed to unnerve Jessica more than anger would have. "I just think you've made a mistake." Amber stepped forward to flank Jessica, clearly interpreting Maya's composed response as weakness rather than the warning it actually was. "The only mistake here is you thinking you can embarrass Jessica in front of everyone and get away with it." Maya's peripheral vision tracked Amber's movement while keeping her primary focus on Jessica, who remained the most immediate threat. Years of sparring against multiple opponents had taught her to maintain awareness of all potential attackers, while prioritizing the most dangerous. In this case, Jessica's combination of anger, embarrassment, and social dominance made her the most likely to escalate to physical violence. "I didn't embarrass anyone," Maya said, taking a small step backward to create more space and improve her tactical position. "I just took back my property." Chloe moved to Maya's other side, completing the triangle formation that trapped her against the lockers. The three girls clearly had experience working together to intimidate their targets, but Maya could see flaws in their positioning that spoke to their lack of understanding about real confrontation. They were bunched too closely together, limiting their individual mobility, and their focus on surrounding her had actually given her clearer lines of attack to each of them. "Your property?" Jessica's voice rose with indignation. "You've been writing about us in that little book of yours, making judgments and observations like you're some kind of superior being. That makes it our business." Maya felt a flicker of genuine anger at the twisted logic, but her training helped her channel the emotion into focus rather than fury. Master Kim had taught her that anger was like fire, dangerous when uncontrolled, but useful when properly directed. She let the anger sharpen her awareness while keeping her voice level. "Writing about my experiences doesn't give you the right to steal my diary," Maya said. "And even if it did, you've already read enough to satisfy your curiosity." The growing crowd of students was starting to form a loose circle around the confrontation, their phones emerging to record what many clearly expected to become a dramatic showdown. Maya could hear whispered speculation about what was happening and who was going to win, the voyeuristic excitement that always accompanied high school conflicts. The attention made her skin crawl, but she also recognized that it might work in her favor by discouraging Jessica from doing anything truly extreme. "Curiosity?" Jessica laughed harshly. "This isn't about curiosity anymore. This is about you learning your place in this school." Maya watched Jessica's body language carefully, noting the increased tension in her shoulders and the way her weight was shifting forward onto the balls of her feet. These were the same preparatory signs she had learned to recognize in sparring partners who were about to launch an attack. The difference was that her sparring partners had been following rules and wearing protective gear, while Jessica was clearly prepared to do whatever she thought necessary to re-establish her dominance. "And what place is that?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about Jessica's perspective. "At the bottom," Amber interjected, her voice carrying the casual cruelty that seemed to come naturally to Jessica's inner circle. "New girls don't get to come in here and act like they're better than everyone else." Maya felt a moment of genuine confusion at the accusation. She had spent 2 months trying to be as invisible as possible, avoiding attention and conflict at every opportunity. The idea that her attempts at invisibility had somehow been interpreted as superiority was baffling, but it also helped her understand the dynamics at play. "I've never acted like I'm better than anyone," Maya said. "I've barely talked to anyone since I got here." "Exactly," Chloe said, as if Maya had just proven her point. "You think you're too good to talk to us, too special to participate in normal social interactions. You sit by yourself, you don't join any activities, and you act like the rest of us are beneath your notice." Maya realized with growing clarity that she was dealing with a fundamental misunderstanding about introversion and social anxiety. What she had interpreted as self-preservation and natural shyness, Jessica's group had read as arrogance and rejection. The revelation did not make their behavior acceptable, but it helped explain why they had targeted her specifically. "That's not arrogance," Maya said carefully. "That's just being new and not knowing how to fit in." Jessica's expression softened slightly, as if she was considering Maya's explanation, but then hardened again, as she seemed to remember the audience watching their every move. The social pressure of maintaining her image in front of her peers was clearly more important to her than any potential understanding they might reach. "Nice try," Jessica said, her voice cold. "But actions speak louder than words, and your actions have been pretty clear. You think you're above us, so maybe it's time someone brought you back down to earth." Maya saw Jessica's muscles tense for action and felt her own body respond automatically, shifting into a more defensive stance while maintaining the appearance of casual positioning. The movement was so subtle that most observers would miss it entirely, but Maya felt the familiar comfort of proper balance and positioning settling into place. "I don't want to fight you," Maya said, making one last attempt to de-escalate the situation. "I just want to be left alone." "Too bad," Jessica replied, lunging forward with her hands outstretched toward Maya's face. Maya's body reacted without conscious thought, 8 years of training taking over as her mind entered the calm, focused state that Master Kim had called the eye of the storm. Time seemed to slow as Jessica's attack unfolded in slow motion, telegraphed by the clumsy way she had committed her entire body to the forward momentum. Maya stepped to the side with fluid grace, allowing Jessica's attack to pass harmlessly by, while simultaneously reaching out to guide Jessica's momentum in the direction she was already moving. The result was that Jessica stumbled forward several steps, her hands grasping at empty air while her face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. The crowd of watching students gasped collectively, clearly not expecting the quiet new girl to move with such surprising speed and control. Maya heard someone whisper, "Did you see that?" but kept her attention focused on the 3 girls who were now staring at her, with expressions ranging from surprise to anger. "How did you?" Jessica started, but Maya was already repositioning herself to face all 3 potential opponents. "I asked you nicely to leave me alone," Maya said, her voice carrying a new authority that made several students in the crowd take notice. "I tried to avoid this conflict, but if you're determined to make this physical, then you should know what you're getting into." Amber and Chloe exchanged uncertain glances, clearly not expecting this level of confidence from someone they had assumed would be an easy target. Jessica, however, was too committed to back down now, especially with half the school watching and recording on their phones. "You got lucky," Jessica snarled, rushing forward again with more determination but no more skill than her first attempt. Maya watched Jessica's second attack with the detached analysis she had learned to apply to sparring partners. Jessica was telegraphing her intentions with her entire body, committing too much energy to wild swings that left her off balance and vulnerable. It was the kind of undisciplined aggression that would have earned immediate correction from any competent instructor. This time, Maya did not simply evade. As Jessica's right hand swept toward her in a clumsy attempt at a slap, Maya stepped inside the attack, caught Jessica's wrist with her left hand, and used Jessica's own momentum to guide her into a controlled throw that sent her stumbling backward into the lockers with a metallic crash. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot, and the crowd of students fell completely silent. Jessica slumped against the lockers, looking dazed and confused, clearly not understanding how she had ended up there. Maya had executed the technique so smoothly that many observers were not sure exactly what they had witnessed. "Jessica!" Amber cried out, rushing to help her friend while shooting Maya a look of pure hatred. "What did you do to her?" "I defended myself," Maya replied calmly, though she felt a flutter of concern as she watched Jessica shake her head as if trying to clear it. The throw had been perfectly controlled, designed to unbalance rather than injure, but Maya knew that even controlled techniques could cause problems if the recipient did not know how to fall properly. Jessica pushed herself away from the lockers, her face red with humiliation and anger. The fact that she had been so easily outmaneuvered by someone she had dismissed as weak was clearly more damaging to her ego than any physical discomfort from the throw. "You think you're clever?" Jessica demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "That was just luck. Try that again and see what happens." Maya felt a profound sadness wash over her as she realized that Jessica was too invested in her image to accept the clear demonstration of superior skill. Instead of recognizing that she was outmatched and withdrawing from the conflict, Jessica was doubling down on aggression that could only lead to escalation and potential injury. "This doesn't have to continue," Maya said, her voice carrying genuine concern. "No one needs to get hurt here." But Jessica was already moving again, this time with Amber joining her in a coordinated attack that showed they had worked together before. Maya found herself facing 2 opponents simultaneously, their lack of training evident in their wild, undisciplined movements, but their determination making them dangerous nonetheless. Maya's training kicked into a higher gear as she faced multiple attackers for the first time outside of a controlled dojo environment. Her body moved with fluid precision, redirecting Amber's grab while simultaneously blocking Jessica's attempted strike. The techniques flowed together seamlessly, each defensive movement setting up the next, while maintaining perfect balance and control. The watching students were now completely silent, their phones capturing every moment of what was clearly far more than a typical high school fight. Maya moved with a grace and precision that spoke of years of dedicated training, her techniques so clean and efficient that they looked almost choreographed. Amber found herself spun around and gently pushed away from the conflict, her momentum redirected so smoothly that she stumbled several steps before regaining her balance. Jessica's strike was caught and redirected into a harmless arc that left her overextended and vulnerable. But Maya chose restraint over retaliation, simply creating distance rather than following up with a counterattack. "Stop," Maya said, her voice carrying an authority that made even Chloe pause in her advance. "This is getting dangerous, and someone is going to get seriously hurt." Jessica wiped blood from her lip where she had bitten herself during the last exchange, her eyes wild with a mixture of pain, embarrassment, and desperate determination. The rational part of her mind had to recognize that she was completely outclassed, but the social pressure of maintaining her dominance in front of her peers was driving her to continue despite the clear futility of her efforts. "I'm not done with you," Jessica panted, though Maya could see the uncertainty creeping into her movements. Maya felt a deep weariness settle over her as she realized that Jessica was not going to stop until she was forced to stop. The conflict had moved beyond any rational dispute about the diary, and had become a matter of social dominance that Jessica felt she could not afford to lose. Maya understood the dynamics at play, but that understanding did not make her next decision any easier. "Yes, you are," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying a finality that made the entire hallway hold its breath. Maya moved forward with the fluid grace of a predator, her body language shifting from defensive to assertive, in a way that made everyone watching take an unconscious step backward. Years of training had taught her to project authority through presence rather than aggression, and the effect on the crowd was immediate and pronounced. Jessica tried to back away, finally recognizing the danger she had placed herself in, but Maya closed the distance with steps that seemed to glide across the floor. There was no anger in Maya's movement, no violence or aggression, just the calm certainty of someone who had complete control over the situation. "I don't want to hurt you," Maya said, her voice carrying genuine compassion despite everything Jessica had put her through. "But I won't let you hurt me either." Jessica swung one final desperate punch toward Maya's face, putting all of her remaining energy into an attack that Maya could see coming from a mile away. Maya caught Jessica's fist in her palm with a sound like a baseball hitting a glove, the impact absorbed so completely that Jessica's knuckles barely made contact with Maya's skin. The sight of Jessica's punch being stopped so effortlessly sent a visible shockwave through the watching crowd. Several students gasped audibly, and Maya heard someone whisper, "Oh my God," in a voice filled with awe and disbelief. Maya held Jessica's fist for a moment, her grip firm but not painful, her eyes meeting Jessica's with an expression of calm certainty that seemed to drain all the fight out of her opponent. Then, with deliberate gentleness, she released Jessica's hand and stepped back, creating space between them while maintaining a posture that suggested she could close that distance again in an instant if necessary. "It's over," Maya said simply. Jessica stared at her own hand, as if she could not believe what had just happened, flexing her fingers to make sure they still worked properly. The punch that had represented her last desperate attempt to salvage her dominance had been stopped as easily as if she were a small child trying to hit an adult. Amber and Chloe stood frozen, clearly uncertain whether they should try to help their friend or distance themselves from what was obviously a lost cause. The dynamic that had existed just minutes earlier, with Jessica as the dominant aggressor and Maya as the helpless victim, had been completely reversed in a way that left all three girls struggling to process the new reality. "How?" Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible above the murmur of the crowd. Maya felt a moment of genuine sympathy for Jessica, recognizing the confusion and humiliation in her voice. Having your entire understanding of your place in the world suddenly upended was painful, regardless of whether that understanding had been built on bullying and intimidation. 8 years of training," Maya said quietly, her voice intended only for Jessica's ears. 8 years of learning that real strength comes from discipline, not aggression. Jessica's eyes widened as she began to understand the magnitude of what she had just encountered. The quiet, unassuming girl she had targeted for harassment was not just lucky or desperate. She was genuinely skilled in ways that made Jessica's attempts at intimidation look foolish by comparison. You're actually," Jessica stammered, unable to complete the thought. "A martial artist," Maya confirmed, though she felt no pride in the revelation. The secret she had worked so hard to keep hidden was now exposed for everyone to see, and she was not sure whether the consequences would be better or worse than the bullying she had endured. The crowd of students was now buzzing with excited conversation as word spread about what they had witnessed. Maya could hear fragments of amazed commentary. "Did you see how fast she moved? She caught that punch like it was nothing. Where did she learn to do that?" Chloe was the first of Jessica's friends to find her voice. "You've been lying to us this whole time," she said, her tone accusatory. "Pretending to be some helpless new girl when you could have kicked our asses whenever you wanted." Maya turned to face Chloe, her expression thoughtful rather than defensive. "I wasn't pretending to be helpless. I was choosing not to use violence to solve my problems." "But you could have," Amber said, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and resentment. All those things we said, you could have stopped us." Maya nodded slowly, understanding the complex emotions that Amber was struggling with. "Yes, I could have, but violence should be a last resort, not a first response. I hoped we could find a better way to resolve our differences." Jessica was still staring at Maya with an expression of dawning comprehension, as if she was seeing her for the first time. "That's why you never fought back before. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't want to." "That's right," Maya confirmed. "Fighting should be about protection, not domination. I only used my skills today because I had exhausted every other option." The philosophical implications of Maya's statement seemed to resonate with some of the watching students, who had clearly expected a very different kind of confrontation. Instead of the brutal, chaotic violence they were accustomed to seeing in high school fights, they had witnessed something that looked almost like a martial arts demonstration, with Maya maintaining perfect control throughout the entire encounter. Mr. Patterson, the vice principal, finally arrived on the scene, pushing through the crowd of students with an expression of stern authority. His appearance sent many of the observers scattering, but enough remained to provide him with a clear audience for whatever disciplinary action he intended to take. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his eyes taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. Maya felt her stomach drop as she realized that her carefully maintained low profile was about to be completely destroyed. The vice principal was known for having zero tolerance for fighting, regardless of circumstances, and Maya was not sure how she could explain what had happened without sounding like she was making excuses. Jessica looked between Maya and Mr. Patterson, clearly weighing her options. Maya could see the calculation in her eyes as she considered whether to tell the truth about what had transpired or attempt to spin the story in her favor. The power dynamic between them had shifted so dramatically that Jessica no longer held the advantage, but she still had the option of playing the victim. "Nothing, Mr. Patterson," Jessica said finally, her voice subdued. "Just a misunderstanding." Maya blinked in surprise, not expecting Jessica to pass up the opportunity to get her in trouble with the administration. Mr. Patterson's eyes narrowed as he looked between the two girls, clearly sensing that he was not getting the full story. "A misunderstanding that required half the school to gather around and watch?" he asked skeptically. Maya realized that Jessica's decision to downplay the incident was probably motivated by self-preservation rather than mercy. Admitting that she had been completely outmaneuvered by the quiet new girl would be social suicide, and Jessica was probably hoping to minimize the damage to her reputation by treating the whole thing as unimportant. "These things happen," Amber said, stepping in to support Jessica's version of events. "Everyone just got carried away watching." Mr. Patterson's expression suggested that he was not buying their explanation, but without clear evidence of wrongdoing or anyone willing to admit what had actually happened, his options were limited. He looked around at the dispersing crowd, clearly frustrated by the conspiracy of silence. "Well, if it was just a misunderstanding, then I suggest you all find somewhere else to understand each other," he said finally. "And next time you have a disagreement, try using words instead of drawing an audience." Maya nodded respectfully, gathering her backpack and diary while trying to process what had just happened. Jessica's decision not to report the incident meant that Maya would avoid official consequences. But it also meant that the true story would spread through the school's rumor mill, rather than being officially documented. She was not sure which outcome would be worse for her long-term prospects. As the crowd dispersed and Mr. Patterson moved on to his next crisis, Maya found herself alone with Jessica, Amber, and Chloe. The four girls stood in awkward silence, the previous dynamic of aggressor and victim completely shattered by Maya's demonstration of superior capability. "So what happens now?" Chloe asked, her voice uncertain. Maya considered the question carefully, recognizing that her response would likely determine how the rest of her time at Riverside High would unfold. She could use her newfound reputation to establish herself as someone not to be messed with, or she could try to return to her previous invisibility, though that seemed unlikely given how public the demonstration had been. "Now we all go to class and pretend this never happened," Maya said finally. "Unless you'd prefer to continue testing whether I was holding back." Jessica's eyes widened at the implication that what they had witnessed was Maya operating with restraint rather than full capability. The idea that she had been completely dominated by someone who was not even trying was clearly difficult for her to process. "You were holding back?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya met her gaze steadily, letting the silence stretch until Jessica understood that the question answered itself. The techniques Maya had used were designed for control and restraint, not injury or humiliation. If she had chosen to escalate the confrontation, the outcome could have been very different. "I don't want to be your enemy," Maya said, her voice carrying genuine sincerity. "I just want to be left alone to finish my education in peace." Jessica nodded slowly, her earlier aggression completely deflated by the realization of how badly she had misjudged her target. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think we can do that." Amber and Chloe exchanged glances but said nothing, clearly taking their cue from Jessica's subdued response. The entire power structure that had governed their interactions for the past 2 months had been completely upended in the span of a few minutes, and none of them were quite sure how to navigate the new reality. Maya shouldered her backpack and headed toward her next class, feeling the weight of dozens of stares following her progress down the hallway. Word of the confrontation was clearly spreading rapidly, and she could already hear whispered conversations about the new girl who knows martial arts and "Did you see what she did to Jessica Parker?" As she walked, Maya reflected on Master Kim's teaching about the consequences of revealing one's capabilities. "Once people know what you can do," he had told her, "they will never see you the same way again. Make sure you are prepared for that burden before you choose to lift the veil." Maya had not chosen to reveal her skills today. The choice had been forced upon her by circumstances beyond her control. But now that the secret was out, she would have to deal with the consequences. Some students would be afraid of her, others would want to test themselves against her, and still others would simply treat her differently because they knew she possessed capabilities they did not understand. The rest of the day passed in a blur of curious stares and whispered conversations. Teachers who had barely acknowledged her existence for 2 months suddenly seemed to pay attention when she entered their classrooms. Students who had never spoken to her before found excuses to walk past her desk or sit nearby during lunch. Maya tried to maintain her usual low profile, but she could feel the shift in how others perceived her. The invisibility that had been her shield for the past 2 months was gone, replaced by a reputation that she had never wanted and was not sure how to manage. During her final period, Maya noticed Isaac Chen sitting across the classroom, his expression thoughtful as he watched her. She had spoken to Isaac a few times during group projects, finding him to be intelligent and kind, but they had never developed anything approaching friendship. Now, however, he seemed to be studying her with new interest. When the bell rang, Isaac approached her desk as other students filed out of the classroom. "That was quite a display this afternoon," he said quietly, his tone neutral but his eyes curious. Maya felt her cheeks flush as she realized that news of the confrontation had spread even further than she had initially thought. "You heard about that?" Isaac smiled slightly. "Maya, by now everyone has heard about it. The question is whether the stories people are telling bear any resemblance to what actually happened." Maya gathered her books slowly, considering how much she wanted to reveal to someone who was still essentially a stranger. "What stories are people telling?" "Well," Isaac said, settling into the desk next to hers as the classroom emptied. "The versions range from you being a secret ninja assassin to Jessica slipping on a wet floor and embarrassing herself. The truth is probably somewhere in between." Maya could not help but smile at the range of interpretations her classmates had generated. Probably closer to the wet floor version than the ninja assassin one. Isaac laughed, and Maya was surprised by how comfortable his presence felt. So you're not going to tell me you're actually a black belt who's been hiding your deadly skills all semester? Maya's pause was long enough to make Isaac's eyes widen with interest. How close am I? He asked. Maya looked around the empty classroom, weighing the benefits of having someone who understood the truth against the risks of further exposure. Isaac had always struck her as trustworthy, and having at least one person who knew the real story might be valuable in the days to come. 8 years of training, she said quietly. 2nd-degree black belt in Taekwondo with additional study in Judo and Aikido. Isaac let out a low whistle. And Jessica Parker decided to pick a fight with you. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Incredibly uninformed, Maya corrected. She had no way of knowing what my background was. Isaac studied her face carefully. But you could have told her. You could have warned her off just by mentioning your training. Why didn't you? Maya considered the question, recognizing that it went to the heart of her philosophy about martial arts and conflict resolution. Because the moment you mention that you know how to fight, every interaction becomes about fighting. People either want to test you or they're afraid of you. There's no middle ground. And now? Isaac asked. Maya sighed, recognizing the truth in his implicit question. Now everyone knows, whether I wanted them to or not. My choice was taken away when Jessica decided to violate my privacy and escalate to violence. Isaac nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I think you handled it about as well as anyone could have. You only used as much force as necessary, and you tried to de-escalate at every opportunity. Maya felt a flutter of gratitude at his understanding. You saw it? I was in the crowd, Isaac admitted. And I've done enough martial arts myself to recognize real skill when I see it. What you did today was textbook conflict resolution, minimum necessary force, maximum control, and genuine attempts to avoid violence until it became unavoidable. Maya looked at Isaac with new interest. You train? Isaac smiled. Not at your level, but I've been doing karate for about 4 years. Enough to know the difference between showing off and genuine self-defense. Maya felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease at the knowledge that at least one person understood the context of what had happened. So what do you think happens next? Isaac considered the question carefully. Well, Jessica and her friends will probably avoid you from now on, which solves your immediate bullying problem. But you're also going to attract attention from people who want to test themselves against you, and from others who are just curious about what you can do. Maya had been dreading exactly that outcome. Any advice for dealing with that? Isaac grinned. Don't let anyone bait you into demonstrating your skills for entertainment. The moment you start performing for an audience, you become a circus act instead of a person. Maya nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his words. What about the people who want to challenge me? Most of them will be all talk, Isaac said. The ones who actually know something about fighting will recognize that you're out of their league and leave you alone. It's the ones who don't know anything about fighting that you have to worry about. Maya understood what he meant. Experienced martial artists understood concepts like respect, discipline, and restraint. It was the untrained individuals who watched too many movies and thought fighting was about proving dominance that posed the real danger. Great, Maya said with a sigh. So I traded one set of problems for a different set of problems. Isaac stood up and shouldered his backpack. Maybe. Or maybe you traded a problem you couldn't control for problems you can control. Jessica was never going to leave you alone as long as she saw you as weak. Now she knows better. And so does everyone else. Maya gathered her own materials, considering Isaac's perspective. You really think this will make things better? I think, Isaac said carefully, that you've established boundaries that people will respect. And I think you've shown that you're someone worth getting to know rather than someone worth picking on. As they walked out of the classroom together, Maya reflected on the dramatic changes that a single confrontation had brought to her life at Riverside High. The quiet invisibility she had cultivated was gone forever, replaced by a reputation that would follow her for the rest of her time at the school. But maybe Isaac was right. Maybe trading the powerlessness of being a victim for the responsibility of being capable was ultimately a positive change. She would have to be more careful now, more aware of how her actions might be interpreted, but she would also no longer have to endure harassment in silence. The hallways felt different as they walked toward the exit, with students stepping aside to let Maya pass and conversations pausing as she approached. Some of the attention felt hostile, but much of it seemed curious rather than threatening. A few students even nodded respectfully as she passed, as if acknowledging her right to occupy space in their world. "You know," Isaac said as they reached the main doors, "if you're looking for a place to train, there's a good dojo about 20 minutes from here. The instructor is excellent, and the students are serious about the art rather than just wanting to learn how to hurt people." Maya felt a spark of interest at the suggestion. She had been missing her training more than she cared to admit, and the idea of returning to a structured learning environment was appealing. "What style do they teach?" "Mixed martial arts, but with a heavy emphasis on traditional values and philosophy," Isaac replied. "Master Rodriguez believes that fighting skill without moral development is dangerous, so there's a lot of focus on character building and conflict avoidance." Maya smiled at the description, which sounded very similar to Master Kim's approach back in Seattle. "You train there?" Isaac nodded. 3 times a week. I could introduce you to Master Rodriguez if you're interested. I think you'd like the environment." Maya considered the offer as they stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine. The idea of returning to regular training was tempting, both for the physical conditioning and for the mental discipline it provided. And having a training partner who understood the philosophical aspects of martial arts might help her navigate the social challenges that lay ahead. "I'd like that," Maya said finally. "When do you usually go?" Isaac grinned. "Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings. Why don't you come with me tomorrow and see what you think?" Maya felt a flutter of anticipation at the prospect of returning to formal training. The confrontation with Jessica had reminded her how much she had missed the physical and mental challenges of martial arts, and the opportunity to train with serious students again was exactly what she needed. "It's a deal," Maya said, extending her hand to shake on the agreement. Isaac took her hand with a firm grip, his expression serious despite his smile. "Welcome to your new life at Riverside High, Maya. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot more interesting than your old one." As Maya walked home that afternoon, she reflected on the truth of Isaac's prediction. Her carefully constructed invisibility was gone, replaced by a visibility that brought both opportunities and challenges. She would have to learn to navigate a social landscape where everyone knew she possessed capabilities that most of them could not understand or match. But for the first time since arriving in Portland, Maya felt like she might actually belong somewhere. The confrontation with Jessica had been traumatic and unwanted, but it had also freed her from the exhausting effort of hiding such a fundamental part of herself. Now perhaps she could begin to find a balance between the martial artist she had always been and the student she needed to be. The diary that had started the whole conflict was still safely tucked in her backpack, its pages containing the private thoughts and observations that had nearly been violated by people who did not understand their significance. Maya made a mental note to find a more secure place to keep it, but she also realized that she no longer felt the same need to hide every aspect of herself from the world around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Maya would face them with the same discipline and integrity that had guided her through 8 years of martial arts training, but she would no longer face them alone. The secret that had isolated her was now the foundation for new connections and possibilities, and Maya found herself cautiously optimistic about what lay ahead. 3 days after the confrontation with Jessica, Maya discovered that her newfound visibility came with unexpected complications. She sat in the cafeteria with Isaac, picking at her sandwich while watching Tyler Morrison approach their table with the swagger of someone who believed his own hype. Tyler was a senior on the wrestling team, known for his aggressive attitude and his habit of picking fights with underclassmen who couldn't defend themselves. "So you're the martial arts girl everyone's talking about," Tyler said, sliding uninvited into the seat across from Maya. His presence immediately drew attention from nearby tables, students turning to watch what they sensed might be another dramatic confrontation. Maya set down her sandwich and met Tyler's gaze steadily. "I'm Maya Chen. I don't know about the rest." Tyler laughed, a sound that carried more challenge than humor. "Come on, don't be modest. Word is you embarrassed Jessica Parker pretty badly the other day, made her look like an amateur." Isaac shifted uncomfortably beside Maya, clearly recognizing the direction this conversation was heading. "Tyler, maybe you should." "I wasn't talking to you, Chen," Tyler interrupted, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "I'm curious about our new celebrity here." "See, I've been wrestling since I was 8 years old, and I've never met a girl who could actually fight. Maya felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded potential conflict, but her voice remained calm. I'm not looking for trouble, Tyler. I just want to eat my lunch in peace. Tyler's grin widened, and Maya could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was clearly the type who enjoyed testing himself against others, especially when he believed he held the advantage. The wrestling team's dominance in school athletics had probably given him confidence that his skills would translate to any physical confrontation. Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? Tyler leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. I'm just making conversation. It's not every day we get someone with your reputation joining our little school. Maya understood that Tyler was probing for weakness, looking for signs that her encounter with Jessica had been luck rather than skill. She had seen this pattern before in her previous school. One demonstration of capability inevitably led to challenges from others who wanted to test themselves or prove their superiority. My reputation is probably exaggerated, Maya said diplomatically. High school rumors tend to grow in the telling. Tyler's expression suggested he wasn't buying her modest deflection. Maybe. Or maybe you're just being humble. Tell you what, why don't you show me some of those moves you used on Jessica? Just for fun, nothing serious. The request sent a ripple of excitement through the nearby tables, with students leaning forward to hear Maya's response. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, all waiting to see how she would handle this very public challenge. Maya had been dreading exactly this scenario. Master Kim had warned her about the burden of reputation, how displaying martial arts skills inevitably attracted those who wanted to test their own abilities or prove their dominance. She had hoped to avoid this type of confrontation, but Tyler's challenge was too public and too direct to simply ignore. I don't think that's a good idea, Maya replied carefully. Martial arts aren't meant for entertainment or casual demonstrations. Tyler's laugh was louder this time, clearly intended to be heard by their growing audience. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're scared of a little friendly sparring. I promise I'll go easy on you. Maya felt her jaw tighten at the condescending tone, but she forced herself to remain calm. Tyler was trying to bait her into exactly the kind of public display that would turn her martial arts skills into a spectacle, rather than a personal discipline. It's not about being scared, Maya said. It's about respect for the art and for safety. Real sparring requires proper equipment and supervision. Isaac nodded in support of Maya's position. She's right, Tyler. You can't just throw down in the middle of the cafeteria. Tyler's eyes flicked to Isaac with obvious disdain. Nobody asked for your opinion, Karate Kid. This is between me and the new girl. Maya felt a flash of anger at Tyler's dismissive treatment of Isaac, who had been nothing but supportive since the incident with Jessica. The disrespect toward her friend triggered a protective instinct that was separate from her own desire to avoid conflict. Don't talk to him like that, Maya said, her voice carrying a new edge that made Tyler's eyebrows rise with interest. There she is, Tyler said with satisfaction. I knew there was some fire under all that politeness, so what do you say? Ready to back up all the stories people are telling about you? Maya realized that Tyler had skillfully maneuvered her into a position where refusing his challenge would look like cowardice, while accepting it would turn her into exactly the kind of spectacle she wanted to avoid. Either choice carried consequences that could affect her remaining time at Riverside High. What exactly are you proposing? Maya asked, buying time while she considered her options. Tyler's grin suggested he thought he had already won. Simple, after school, in the gym. Just some light sparring to see what you've got. Nothing serious, just enough to satisfy everyone's curiosity. The suggestion sent another wave of excited murmur through their audience. Maya could see phones emerging as students began recording what they clearly expected to become a viral moment. The pressure to accept Tyler's challenge was building with each passing second. Maya looked around at the expectant faces surrounding their table, recognizing that her decision would define how she was perceived for the rest of her time at Riverside High. If she backed down, she would be seen as someone whose previous victory was based on luck rather than skill. If she accepted, she would be participating in exactly the kind of public spectacle that Master Kim had warned her to avoid. You realize that if I agree to this, you're assuming all the risk, Maya said quietly. I tried to avoid conflict with Jessica, and you saw how that ended. Tyler's confidence didn't waver. I'm not Jessica Parker. I actually know how to fight. Maya studied Tyler's face, seeing the typical arrogance of someone who had dominated in one combat sport and assumed that superiority would transfer to all others. Wrestling was an excellent foundation for ground fighting, but it left significant gaps in stand-up technique and defense against strikes. "All right," Maya said finally, her voice carrying a resignation that surprised even her. "After school in the gym. But we do this properly, with rules, with safety equipment, and with someone qualified to supervise." Tyler's triumphant expression faltered slightly at Maya's conditions. "Rules? Come on, we're not talking about some formal tournament here." "Those are my terms," Maya said firmly. "If you want to test your skills against mine, we do it safely and with proper oversight. Otherwise, we have nothing to discuss." Isaac leaned forward, clearly concerned about the direction the conversation was taking. "Maya, you don't have to prove anything to anyone." Maya appreciated Isaac's support, but she could see that Tyler's challenge had taken on a momentum of its own. Half the cafeteria was now watching their exchange, and word was already spreading to other tables. Refusing at this point would only delay the inevitable, while making her appear weak. "Coach Williams can supervise," Tyler said, referring to the wrestling coach who was known for his no-nonsense approach to training. "He'll make sure everything stays above board." Maya nodded slowly, recognizing that Coach Williams had a reputation for fairness and safety consciousness. "Fine. 4 o'clock in the main gym. Protective gear mandatory." Tyler stood up from the table, his swagger fully restored, now that he had gotten the agreement he wanted. "Looking forward to it, Maya. This should be fun." As Tyler walked away, Maya felt the weight of what she had just committed to settling on her shoulders. Isaac turned to her with an expression of concern mixed with admiration. "Are you sure about this?" Isaac asked quietly. Maya wasn't sure about anything, but she recognized that the challenge had become inevitable the moment Tyler made it public. "Not really, but backing down now would just postpone this until later, probably under worse circumstances." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "You know he's going to try to use his size and strength advantage to overwhelm you, right?" Maya had already been considering Tyler's likely strategy. Wrestling emphasized control through strength and positioning, and Tyler would probably try to close distance quickly to negate any striking advantage she might have. "I'm counting on it," Maya said. "Predictable opponents are easier to handle than creative ones." The rest of the school day passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Word of the upcoming match spread through the hallways like wildfire, with students approaching Maya to offer everything from encouragement to betting odds. By the time the final bell rang, it seemed like half the school was planning to attend what many were already calling the fight of the semester. Maya stopped by her locker to collect her gear, grateful that she had brought her protective equipment to school out of habit rather than planning. Her training uniform was still in her gym bag from her last workout, and she had mouthguards, gloves, and other safety gear that would be essential for any serious sparring session. Isaac met her outside the gym, carrying his own gear bag. "I talked to Coach Williams. He's agreed to referee, and he's bringing proper mats to make sure the surface is safe." Maya felt a flutter of gratitude for Isaac's thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I know you didn't have to get involved in this." Isaac shrugged. "We're training partners now. Looking out for each other is part of the deal." The main gym was already crowded when they arrived, with students claiming spots along the walls and in the bleachers. Maya was surprised by the size of the audience, but she tried to focus on the familiar routine of preparing for competition rather than the dozens of eyes watching her every move. Coach Williams approached them as they entered, his expression serious, but not unfriendly. "Miss Chen, I understand you've agreed to a sparring match with Tyler Morrison." Maya nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir. Thank you for agreeing to supervise." Coach Williams studied her carefully. "I've heard some interesting things about your background. Tyler tells me he just wants to test his skills, but I want to make sure this stays friendly and safe." "That's my intention as well," Maya assured him. "I'm not here to hurt anyone or prove anything. I just want to end this before it becomes a bigger problem." Coach Williams's expression suggested he understood more about the social dynamics at play than his words indicated. Fair enough. Standard sparring rules. No strikes to the head or neck. Tap out means immediate stop, and I have absolute authority to end the match if I see anything unsafe. Tyler emerged from the locker room wearing wrestling gear and a confident smile that suggested he viewed this as little more than an extended practice session. He had clearly spent time psyching himself up for the encounter, and his body language radiated the kind of aggressive confidence that had probably served him well on the wrestling mat. Maya changed into her training uniform in the adjacent room, taking time to center herself and focus on the technical aspects of what she was about to face. Tyler's wrestling background meant he would be strong and explosive, with excellent takedown skills and ground control. Her advantage would be in striking distance and in her broader range of techniques. When she emerged, the gymnasium felt noticeably quieter as students got their first look at Maya in martial arts gear. Her uniform was simple and practical, but it carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had earned the right to wear it through years of dedicated training. Coach Williams had arranged mats in the center of the gym floor, creating a proper sparring area that would provide some cushioning for any throws or takedowns. The setup looked professional and serious, which seemed to have a sobering effect on some of the more boisterous spectators. "All right, both of you to the center," Coach Williams called out, his voice carrying easily through the gymnasium. Maya and Tyler approached each other on the mats, the contrast between their backgrounds evident in their movement and posture. Tyler moved with the heavy confidence of someone who was used to overpowering his opponents through superior conditioning and aggression. Maya moved with the fluid economy of motion that came from years of technical refinement. "I want a clean match," Coach Williams said, addressing both competitors but looking primarily at Tyler. "This is sparring, not a fight. The moment either of you loses control or ignores my instructions, this ends immediately." Both fighters nodded their understanding, though Maya could see the excitement in Tyler's eyes that suggested he was viewing this as more than just practice. The audience around them was completely silent now, everyone sensing that they were about to witness something significant. "Touch gloves and begin when you're ready," Coach Williams instructed, stepping back to give them room. Maya and Tyler moved to the center of the mat, touching gloves in the traditional gesture of respect, before backing away to establish fighting distance. Maya settled into a balanced stance that would allow her to defend against takedowns while maintaining striking options, while Tyler adopted the forward-leaning posture typical of wrestlers preparing to shoot for the legs. The moment of actual engagement felt almost anticlimactic after all the buildup. Tyler moved first, attempting the explosive double-leg takedown that was probably his most reliable technique. Maya had been expecting exactly this approach, and she sidestepped smoothly while controlling Tyler's head and redirecting his momentum. Tyler found himself driven past Maya's position, his takedown attempt turning into an awkward stumble that left him off balance and exposed. Maya could have easily followed up with a strike or throw, but she chose restraint, simply resetting to a neutral position and allowing Tyler to recover. The failed takedown attempt brought a murmur of surprise from the watching students, many of whom had expected Tyler to dominate the early exchanges through superior athleticism. Instead, Maya's technical superiority was already evident in the way she had nullified his attack without appearing to exert any significant effort. Tyler reset quickly, his confidence apparently unshaken by the unsuccessful opening. He circled Maya carefully, looking for a better angle of attack while trying to time her movement patterns. Maya maintained her stance and distance, content to let Tyler initiate while she gathered information about his preferred techniques and timing. Tyler's second attack was a feint, followed by another takedown attempt, this time targeting Maya's lead leg. Again, Maya read the attack early and defended smoothly, this time using Tyler's own momentum to put him in a compromised position where she could have easily swept his legs or struck his exposed ribs. Again, Maya chose restraint over aggression, simply maintaining control until Tyler could recover his balance. The pattern was becoming clear to the more knowledgeable observers. Maya was not just defending Tyler's attacks, she was demonstrating that she could counter them at will, but was choosing not to escalate the confrontation. Tyler's frustration was beginning to show as his third takedown attempt was similarly neutralized. Wrestling had taught him to be aggressive and persistent, but Maya's superior technical knowledge was making his strength and conditioning advantages irrelevant. Every attack he launched was being turned against him, leaving him more tired and off balance, while Maya seemed to be exerting minimal effort. "Come on, fight me," Tyler demanded, his voice carrying a note of desperation that made Coach Williams take a step closer to the action. Maya's response was calm and measured. "I am fighting you. This is what real fighting looks like. Technique over aggression, control over chaos." Tyler's next attack was wilder, driven more by frustration than strategy. He lunged forward with both hands reaching for Maya's uniform, abandoning the technical approach that had at least given him a chance of success. Maya stepped aside and caught Tyler's extended arm, using his own momentum to execute a perfect hip throw that sent him tumbling across the mat. The throw was so clean and effortless that it drew gasps from the watching students. Tyler rolled with the impact and came up quickly. But the demonstration of Maya's superior technique was now undeniable. She had not just defended his attack. She had turned it into a textbook demonstration of leverage and timing. Coach Williams was watching more carefully now, his experienced eye recognizing the vast gap in skill level between the two competitors. Tyler was a good wrestler, but Maya was operating on a completely different level of technical sophistication. Tyler's approach became more desperate as he realized he was being outclassed. He abandoned his wrestling techniques entirely and began throwing wild punches, hoping to catch Maya off guard with the change in strategy. But Maya's stand-up training was even more advanced than her grappling, and she moved through Tyler's attacks like she was dancing, deflecting, and redirecting without ever losing her balance or composure. The final exchange came when Tyler, exhausted and frustrated, attempted one last desperate rush. Maya met him halfway, catching his momentum and redirecting it into a perfectly controlled throw that put Tyler flat on his back with Maya in a dominant position above him. She could have easily transitioned to a submission hold or delivered strikes to end the match conclusively, but instead she simply held the position until Coach Williams called for them to break. "That's enough," Coach Williams announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who recognized when a demonstration had achieved its purpose. "Match over." Maya released Tyler immediately and stepped back, offering her hand to help him up. Tyler hesitated for a moment, his pride clearly struggling with the reality of what had just happened, but he eventually accepted her assistance and stood up. The gymnasium was completely silent as both fighters moved to the center of the mat for the traditional post-match acknowledgement. Tyler's face was flushed with exertion and embarrassment, while Maya appeared completely unfazed by the encounter. "Good match," Maya said, extending her hand for the customary handshake. Tyler looked at her extended hand for a moment before accepting it with obvious reluctance. "Yeah," he said quietly, "good match." Coach Williams stepped between them, his expression serious but not unsympathetic. "I hope you both learned something today. Fighting isn't about proving who's toughest. It's about discipline, respect, and knowing when not to fight at all." As the crowd began to disperse, Maya felt the familiar mix of satisfaction and regret that followed any physical confrontation. She had accomplished her goal of ending Tyler's challenge definitively, but she had also further cemented her reputation as someone not to be trifled with. The balance between respect and fear was a delicate one, and she was not sure which side of that line she was currently occupying. Isaac approached her as she gathered her gear, his expression showing a mixture of admiration and concern. "That was incredible," he said quietly, "but I'm worried about what happens next." Maya understood his concern. Each demonstration of her capabilities seemed to raise the stakes for the next challenger, and she was beginning to wonder where this cycle would ultimately lead. The quiet anonymity she had originally sought at Riverside High was now completely impossible, replaced by a visibility that brought both opportunities and dangers. As she left the gymnasium that afternoon, Maya reflected on the strange turn her life had taken in just a few days. The diary that had started this whole sequence of events was safely tucked away in her locker, but the secrets it had contained were now public knowledge. She was no longer the invisible new girl trying to blend in. She was Maya Chen, the martial artist who had defeated both Jessica Parker and Tyler Morrison in very public demonstrations of superior skill. The question now was what she would do with the reputation she had never wanted but could no longer escape. 2 weeks later, Maya walked through the halls of Riverside High with a confidence she had never possessed before. The dramatic confrontations with Jessica and Tyler had fundamentally shifted the social landscape around her, creating a bubble of respect that allowed her to move freely without fear of harassment or intimidation. The transformation had been gradual but undeniable. Students who had previously ignored her now nodded respectfully when she passed. Teachers seemed more engaged during class discussions, as if they finally saw her as a complete person rather than just another quiet face in the crowd. Even the cafeteria felt different, with several groups inviting her to join their tables instead of leaving her to eat alone. Maya had initially been suspicious of the sudden attention, wondering if people were interested in her as a person or simply fascinated by her fighting abilities. But, as the days passed, she began to recognize genuine friendships forming with classmates who appreciated her thoughtful observations and dry sense of humor rather than just her martial arts skills. Isaac had become her closest friend and training partner, introducing her to Master Rodriguez's dojo, where she quickly found her place among serious students who valued discipline and respect over aggression and showing off. The return to structured training had been exactly what she needed, providing both physical conditioning and mental clarity while helping her process the dramatic changes in her life. Jessica Parker had undergone her own transformation following their confrontation. The public humiliation of being so thoroughly outmatched had forced her to reevaluate her approach to social dominance, and she had gradually shifted from intimidation to leadership through more positive means. She and Maya were not friends, but they coexisted peacefully with a mutual understanding that neither had anything to gain from renewed conflict. Tyler Morrison had taken his defeat harder, initially avoiding Maya entirely before eventually approaching her with a request for training advice. His wrestling coach had recommended cross-training in other martial arts to improve his overall fighting skills, and Tyler had swallowed his pride enough to ask Maya for guidance. She had directed him to Master Rodriguez's dojo, where his aggressive tendencies were being channeled into more constructive directions. The diary that had started the entire sequence of events remained Maya's most treasured possession, but she no longer felt the need to hide it as carefully as before. Her private thoughts were still private, but the fear of having her inner self exposed and mocked had largely disappeared. She had learned that authenticity was more powerful than invisibility, and that hiding her true nature had been more exhausting than revealing it. Maya's relationship with her parents had also improved as she became more open about her experiences at school. They had been concerned about her initial isolation and withdrawal, but seeing her develop genuine friendships and regain her confidence had reassured them that the move to Portland was ultimately beneficial for the entire family. The martial arts community in Portland had welcomed Maya warmly, with Master Rodriguez encouraging her to compete in local tournaments and eventually pursue instructor certification. The idea of teaching others appealed to Maya, who had discovered that sharing knowledge and helping students develop both physical skills and personal discipline gave her a sense of purpose that pure academics could not match. Maya's academic performance had also improved dramatically once she no longer spent all her energy on maintaining invisibility and avoiding conflict. Teachers noticed her increased participation and engagement, leading to opportunities for advanced placement courses and early college credit that would benefit her future educational goals. The most significant change, however, was internal. Maya had learned that strength was not about the ability to defeat others in combat, but about the courage to be authentically herself regardless of how others might react. The quiet girl who had arrived at Riverside High, hoping to blend into the background, had discovered that her true power lay not in hiding her capabilities, but in using them responsibly and with integrity. As she prepared for graduation and the next phase of her life, Maya reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with Jessica's attempt to humiliate her through her diary. What had seemed like a crisis at the time had actually been the catalyst for discovering her place in the world and learning to balance strength with compassion, confidence with humility. The bullies who had tried to tear her down had inadvertently helped her build herself up stronger than before. Maya Chen was no longer hiding in the shadows, and she never would again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.